The GPS showed a route that did not exist on any map. In 2016, a long-haul trucker disappeared in Oregon's backcountry. 9 years later, his sealed trailer is located miles from the nearest road with everything locked. The dispatcher took the call at 3:17 p.m. on November 8, 2016. A trucker reported he was running behind schedule on Highway 97 near Kemmelt, Oregon. He said his GPS was offering an alternate route that would cut 40 minutes off his drive time. The route branched east from Highway 97 onto a series of county roads before reconnecting with the highway near Lapine. Dispatch pulled up the mapping software. They saw the same route. It looked legitimate. Paved roads, no restrictions listed. They told him to use his judgment. He said he would take it and check in from Lapine. That was the last anyone heard from him. By 8 p.m., the carrier tried calling. No answer. They pinged his GPS unit. The device was offline. The last transmission had come at 3:42 p.m., placing the truck on a road labeled County Route 615, approximately 18 miles east of Highway 97. The carrier called dispatch and asked if they had heard from him. Dispatch said no. The carrier waited until midnight, then contacted the Deschutes County Sheriff. Deputies began searching at first light. They drove Highway 97, looking for the turnoff to County Route 615. They could not find it. They checked the county road database. No road by that name existed in the area. They pulled historical maps going back 50 years. Nothing. County Route 615 did not exist, and never had. Yet the driver's GPS had recorded him traveling on it for 24 minutes before going dark. The driver had been on the road for 12 years. He ran long-haul routes from Seattle to Los Angeles, usually making the trip twice a week. Co-workers described him as reliable and punctual. He knew the West Coast highways better than most. His logbook was always current. His truck was well maintained. Family said he was methodical and cautious, not the type to take unnecessary risks. His wife said he had called her that morning from a rest area near Bend. He sounded tired but fine. He said he would be home by midnight. The cargo was 40 pallets of electronics, bound for a distribution center in Sacramento. High-value freight, which made the carrier nervous. But the trailer had been sealed at the loading dock in Seattle with a numbered bolt. Company policy and insurance requirements mandated the seal remain intact until delivery. Breaking it without authorization meant immediate termination and possible legal action. The driver knew this. He had hauled sealed trailers dozens of times without incident. Investigators examined the driver's GPS unit after the truck was eventually recovered. The device was a commercial-grade unit, not a consumer model. It received updates from multiple satellites and cross-referenced positions with a database of known roads. The unit was designed to prevent errors, yet the data showed the truck had left Highway 97 at 3:28 p.m. and traveled east on County Route 615 at an average speed of 42 miles per hour. The road appeared on the GPS screen as a solid line, indistinguishable from any other paved county road. But when investigators tried to verify the route, they found nothing. No road, no pavement, no right-of-way, just dense forest. A GPS technician analyzed the device. He said the unit had not malfunctioned. The data was clean, properly formatted, and consistent with normal operation. The truck had been exactly where the GPS said it was. The problem was that the location did not match any known road. The technician suggested the GPS might have picked up a ghost road, a digital artifact created by mapping errors or outdated survey data. Sometimes old logging roads or abandoned rail lines appeared in databases long after they had been reclaimed by nature. But he admitted County Route 615 was different. It was too well defined, too precisely mapped. If it was a ghost road, someone had gone to great effort to make it look real. Search teams deployed into the area where the GPS had last transmitted. The terrain was rugged high desert transitioning to pine forest. Elevation ranged from 4,000 to 6,000 feet. Dirt roads crisscrossed the region, most unmarked and unmaintained. Some led to old timber sales. Others dead-ended at forgotten homesteads or abandoned mines. The teams covered over 200 square miles in 3 weeks. They found no trace of the truck. The driver's cell phone record showed no activity after 3:15 p.m. His last text message had been sent to his wife at 2:47 p.m., saying he was making good time and would try to get home early. The phone had been on and connected to a tower near Kemmelt when the text was sent. After that, nothing. No calls, no data usage, no tower pings. The phone had either been turned off or had lost signal. Cell coverage in the area was spotty at best. Losing signal was not unusual. Family members drove to Oregon and joined the search. They posted flyers at truck stops and rest areas along Highway 97. The driver's brother hired a private search and rescue team with dogs and drones. The dogs picked up no scent trails. The drones covered vast stretches of forest, but saw nothing that resembled a tractor trailer. After 2 months, the family called off the private search. The cost was too high, and the odds too long. The brother said it felt like his sibling had driven off the edge of the earth. One detail troubled investigators. The driver had not called dispatch or his carrier when the GPS suggested the alternate route. Company policy required drivers to confirm unusual routes with dispatch before deviating from planned highways. The driver had followed this policy for years. Why had he ignored it this time? His wife said he had been under pressure to make up time. An earlier delivery had run late due to a loading dock delay in Seattle. He was trying to stay on schedule. But even under pressure, taking an unknown route was out of character. The carrier reviewed the GPS vendor's database. They wanted to know how County Route 615 had appeared in the system. The vendor ran diagnostics and found nothing wrong. The database had been updated 2 weeks before the incident. No anomalies were detected. No unauthorized changes. No corrupted files. The route should not have appeared, but it had, and now it was gone. The vendor checked the current database. County Route 615 was not there. It had vanished as completely as the driver. A software engineer who specialized in GPS mapping systems examined the case. She said databases could be hacked or injected with false data. Someone with technical skills could create a phantom road that appeared real to GPS units. The road would show up for a limited time, then disappear when the hacker removed the data. But doing so would require access to the vendor's servers and knowledge of their update protocols. It was possible, but unlikely, and the motive was unclear. Why target a random trucker hauling electronics? The engineer admitted she had no answers. The case did not fit any pattern she recognized. Months passed. The investigation went cold. The driver was declared missing. His wife filed for death benefits. The carrier settled the insurance claim for the lost cargo. The truck's lease was written off. The case file was archived. Then in the summer of 2025, 9 years after the driver disappeared, a wildfire broke out in the Deschutes National Forest. The fire started from a lightning strike and spread quickly through dry underbrush. Firefighters worked for 3 weeks to contain it. When the flames were finally extinguished, the burned area covered 12,000 acres. Fire crews walked through the scorched landscape, checking for hotspots. One crew member noticed something odd on a ridgeline, about 5 miles north of Highway 97. It looked like a vehicle, blackened and stripped by the fire, but still recognizable. He radioed his supervisor. They hiked up to investigate. It was a tractor-trailer rig. The cab was burned out. The tires melted. The paint gone. But the frame was intact. The trailer was still attached. The numbered seal on the trailer doors had survived the fire. The number matched the paperwork from the Seattle loading dock 9 years earlier. The crew called the county sheriff. Deputies arrived by helicopter. They confirmed it was the missing driver's truck. The location made no sense. The truck was parked on a narrow dirt track that wound up the ridgeline. The track was barely wide enough for the rig. Trees crowded both sides. How the driver had navigated it without getting stuck or damaging the truck was unclear. The track did not appear on any map. Forest Service records showed no logging activity in that area for over 20 years. The track should not have been passable. Yet the truck was there, locked and sealed, exactly as it had been when it left Seattle. The cab was searched carefully. The fire had destroyed most of the interior. The seats were burned to springs. The dashboard was melted, but metal components had survived. The keys were still in the ignition, fused to the steering column by heat. The driver's logbook, protected in a metal glove box, was charred but partially readable. The last entry was dated November 8, 2016 at 3:25 p.m. It read, "Taking alternate route per GPS. Road looks good. Will advise." No human remains were found in the cab or near the truck. Cadaver dogs were brought in and searched the surrounding area. They alerted in one spot, about 30 yards from the truck, downslope in a small ravine. Investigators dug carefully. They found bones. A forensic anthropologist examined them and determined they were human. The bones were consistent with an adult male. Dental records confirmed they belonged to the missing driver. The bones were scattered, suggesting animal activity after death. The anthropologist noted the remains were incomplete. Several major bones were missing, including the skull. What remained showed no signs of trauma. No fractures, no cut marks, no indication of violence. Cause of death could not be determined. The anthropologist estimated the remains had been exposed to the elements for several years before being covered by debris and vegetation. Time of death was impossible to pinpoint, but was consistent with the disappearance in 2016. Investigators tried to reconstruct what had happened. The truck had left Highway 97 at 3:28 p.m., following a route suggested by the GPS. The driver had taken the route, believing it was legitimate. He had driven for 24 minutes, covering approximately 18 miles, before the GPS stopped transmitting. At some point, he had turned onto the narrow dirt track and driven up the ridgeline. He had parked the truck. Then he had walked downslope into the ravine. There, for reasons unknown, he had died. The question was why? Why had he left the truck? Why had he walked into the ravine? And how had he ended up 5 miles north of where his GPS said he was? The GPS data placed him on County Route 615 east of Highway 97, but the truck had been found north of the highway. The two locations were incompatible. Either the GPS data was wrong, or the truck had moved after the GPS went offline. A search and rescue expert reviewed the case. He noted that people who become lost often exhibit paradoxical behavior. They remove clothing in cold weather. They leave shelters and walk into dangerous terrain. The behavior is caused by hypothermia or dehydration affecting the brain. The driver might have left the truck in a confused state and wandered into the ravine, but the timeline did not support this. November temperatures in the area ranged from 30 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit, not cold enough to cause rapid hypothermia, and the driver should have had water in the truck. There was no reason for him to become dehydrated in less than an hour. The trailer was examined. The seal was photographed and then cut. The doors opened to reveal the cargo still secured to pallets. 40 pallets of electronics, exactly as listed on the manifest. The boxes showed fire damage, but the contents were largely intact. Nothing was missing. Nothing had been added. The cargo had sat in the trailer for 9 years, untouched and forgotten. The insurance company that had paid the claim 9 years earlier sent a recovery team to assess the goods. Most of the electronics were obsolete and worthless. The pallets were disassembled and hauled away as salvage. One item in the trailer stood out. Tucked behind the last pallet was a small duffel bag that did not appear on the manifest. Deputies opened it carefully. Inside were personal items belonging to the driver, a change of clothes, toiletries, a paperback novel, and a handheld GPS unit. The handheld unit was a backup, the kind truckers carry in case their main GPS fails. Deputies powered it on. The battery was dead. They charged it and turned it on again. The unit booted normally. The screen showed a map of Oregon with a highlighted route. The route began on Highway 97 and branched east onto a road labeled County Route 615. The handheld GPS was an older model, no longer supported by the manufacturer. It stored maps internally rather than downloading them in real time. Investigators extracted the map data and analyzed it. County Route 615 appeared as a solid line running east from Highway 97, exactly as the truck's GPS had shown. But the map file was dated October 2016, 1 month before the driver disappeared. Someone had edited the map and added the phantom road. The edit was clean and professional, indistinguishable from legitimate map data. Whoever had done it knew what they were doing. A forensic data analyst examined the handheld GPS. She found metadata embedded in the map file. The metadata included a timestamp and a user ID. The timestamp showed the map had been edited on October 15, 2016, at 11:34 a.m. The user ID was a string of random characters that meant nothing on its own, but the analyst ran it through a database of known GPS user accounts. The ID matched an account registered to a mapping enthusiast who contributed updates to open-source GPS databases. The enthusiast lived in Bend, Oregon, about 40 miles from where the driver had disappeared. The county sheriff contacted the mapping enthusiast. He was a retired surveyor who spent his free time hiking and correcting errors in GPS maps. He said he contributed dozens of updates every year, fixing roads that had been mislabeled or adding trails that did not appear in commercial databases. He said he had no memory of editing a map in October 2016. The sheriff showed him the extracted map file. The surveyor examined it and said it was not his work. The style did not match his usual edits, and he would never add a road that did not exist, that violated the ethical guidelines of the mapping community. He said his account must have been compromised. Someone had used his credentials to upload the phantom road. Investigators tried to trace the account breach. They contacted the open-source GPS project and requested server logs from October 2016. The project had retained logs for only 2 years. Anything older had been deleted. There was no way to determine who had accessed the surveyor's account or where the edit had originated. The trail went cold. One theory emerged. Someone had deliberately created County Route 615 to lure trucks off Highway 97. The motive was unclear. The driver's cargo had not been stolen. His truck had not been stripped for parts. If hijacking was the goal, the plan had failed. But perhaps the goal had been something else. Perhaps the phantom road was a test, an experiment to see if GPS systems could be manipulated to redirect vehicles. If so, the driver had been an unwitting participant. A federal investigator specializing in cybercrimes reviewed the case. He said GPS spoofing was a known threat. Criminals had used it to redirect ships, confuse aircraft, and steal vehicles. But those attacks required expensive equipment and technical expertise. Creating a phantom road in a GPS database was simpler but less reliable. The victim had to accept the suggested route. Most drivers would ignore an unfamiliar road or call dispatch for confirmation. The driver in this case had done neither. The investigator said that made him either very trusting or very desperate. Given the time pressure the driver was under, desperation seemed more likely. The investigator dug deeper into GPS vulnerabilities. He consulted with researchers who studied navigation system security. They explained that commercial GPS databases relied on crowdsourced data mixed with official government surveys. The crowdsourced portion was vulnerable. Contributors uploaded corrections and additions with minimal oversight. A sophisticated actor could inject false data that would propagate through the system for weeks or months before being detected and removed. The window was narrow but sufficient. If someone had timed it correctly, they could have placed County Route 615 into the database in mid-October, knowing it would appear on GPS units by early November. Then they could remove it in December, leaving no trace. But the researchers pointed out a flaw in this theory. Most GPS units cached map data. Even if the false road was removed from the central database, it would persist on individual devices until the next update cycle. The driver's handheld GPS had the phantom road embedded in its October 2016 map file. His truck's GPS should have had it too. Yet when the vendor checked their current database in late 2016, County Route 615 was gone. Either the hacker had extraordinary access and skill, or something else was happening that no one understood. One researcher proposed an alternative. He suggested County Route 615 might have been a real road, briefly, not a physical road, but a planned road that existed only in survey documents and provisional maps. Government agencies sometimes planned roads years before construction began. Those plans appeared in internal databases and occasionally leaked into public mapping systems. The road would show up on GPS units even though no pavement had been laid. Drivers who followed such routes would find themselves on dirt tracks or open land. The researcher said he had documented a dozen similar cases across the country, but none had resulted in a disappearance. Drivers realized their mistake and turned around. This case was different because the driver had kept going. The wildfire that had exposed the truck also destroyed much of the dirt track leading to the ridgeline. Investigators tried to trace the track back to Highway 97, but found only fragments. Erosion and new growth had erased most of the path. What remained suggested the track had been old, possibly dating back decades. It might have been a logging road or a fire access road, long since abandoned. How it had remained passable enough for a fully loaded tractor trailer was a mystery. A retired Forest Service ranger, who had worked in the area for 30 years, was consulted. He remembered the ridgeline. He said there had been a road up there in the 1970s, built by a timber company that went bankrupt before completing their harvest. The road had been graded and compacted, but never paved. By the 1980s, the Forest Service had closed it and removed the signs. Vegetation had reclaimed it quickly. The ranger said he had hiked the area in the early 2000s and could barely tell where the road had been. For a truck to navigate it in 2016 would have required clearing brush and moving fallen trees. Either someone had maintained the road in secret, or the driver had been extraordinarily determined. One deputy suggested the driver had not been driving at all. Perhaps someone else had driven the truck up the ridgeline after the driver had left or died, but there was no evidence of another person, no footprints, no fingerprints, no DNA. The driver had been alone. The deputy's partner offered a darker theory. What if the driver had been coerced? What if someone had forced him off the highway, driven him up the ridgeline at gunpoint, and then killed him? But the autopsy found no evidence of violence, and the cargo had not been stolen. A hijacker would have taken the electronics. They were worth over $200,000. Leaving them made no sense. The forensic psychologist who had consulted on earlier cases was brought back. She reviewed the evidence and the driver's history. She noted that long-haul truckers often experienced extreme isolation and fatigue. The combination could produce altered mental states. The driver might have believed he was following a legitimate route even as warning signs accumulated. The road narrowing, the pavement ending, the trees closing in. His brain, exhausted and under pressure, might have rationalized each anomaly. By the time he realized his mistake, he was committed. Turning around with a 53-foot trailer on a narrow track was nearly impossible. He had driven forward until the track ended. Then he had parked and walked away, perhaps to scout a turnaround point. In the ravine, disoriented and exhausted, he had collapsed. The psychologist admitted this was speculative, but she said it fit the pattern of other cases where experienced drivers had made catastrophic errors. The human brain was not designed for the isolation and monotony of long-haul trucking. It found ways to cope, and sometimes those coping mechanisms failed. The driver had trusted his GPS because he needed to believe there was a way out of his predicament. The GPS had betrayed that trust. Whether through hacking, database error, or some other cause, the result was the same. The driver had died alone on a ridgeline, following a road that should not have existed. The driver's wife was notified of the discovery. She traveled to Oregon and met with investigators. She was shown the recovered items from the truck. She confirmed the clothing and toiletries belonged to her husband. She identified the novel. He had been reading it the week before he disappeared. She asked to see the logbook. The entry about taking the alternate route brought her to tears. She said her husband would never have taken an unknown route without checking with dispatch. Something must have made him feel it was safe. The GPS must have convinced him. She asked about the bones. Investigators explained what they had found. She asked if her husband had suffered. They said they did not know. The cause of death was undetermined. He might have fallen and hit his head. He might have had a heart attack. He might have simply walked into the ravine and collapsed from exhaustion or dehydration. Without more remains, they could not say. She asked if he could be buried. They said yes. The medical examiner would release the remains once all tests were complete. She thanked them and left. The case was officially closed. The driver's death was listed as accidental with contributing factors of disorientation and exposure. The phantom road was attributed to a database error or malicious hacking, motive unknown. The county sheriff recommended that GPS vendors implement stronger security measures to prevent unauthorized map edits. The recommendation was noted, but no changes were made. The cost of upgrading systems was considered too high relative to the risk. In the months after the case closed, other truckers began reporting strange GPS behavior in the area around Highway 97. Some said their units suggested routes that did not exist. Others said their GPS screens showed roads that disappeared when they tried to follow them. A few reported being directed onto dirt tracks that led nowhere. Most ignored the suggestions and stayed on the highway. But one driver, curious and experienced, followed a suggested route east of Comolt. He drove for 10 minutes before the road narrowed to a single lane. He stopped and turned around. When he returned to Highway 97, he checked his GPS log. The route he had taken did not appear in the log. It was as if he had never left the highway. The driver posted about the experience on a trucking forum. Other drivers responded with similar stories. A pattern emerged. The phantom routes always appeared in the same general area, within a 20-mile radius of Comolt. They always branched east from Highway 97, and they always disappeared from GPS logs after being traveled. One driver called it the Bermuda Triangle of Oregon trucking. Another said it was a glitch in the GPS network, something about the terrain interfering with satellite signals. A third driver said it was deliberate, someone playing games with truckers for unknown reasons. A technology journalist investigated the reports. She contacted GPS vendors and asked if they had received complaints about phantom routes in Oregon. Most said no. One vendor admitted they had received a handful of reports, but had been unable to replicate the issue. The journalist drove to Oregon and tested multiple GPS units along Highway 97. None showed phantom routes. She interviewed truckers who claimed to have seen the routes. They were credible, experienced drivers with no reason to lie. But without evidence, the journalist could not verify their claims. She wrote an article calling the phenomenon an urban legend, a modern ghost story told by truckers to pass the time. But the stories continued. In 2024, a trucker hauling lumber from Bend to Klamath Falls reported that his GPS directed him onto a road that ended at a sheer cliff. He stopped 10 feet from the edge. He got out and looked around. The road behind him was paved and well maintained. The road ahead was a drop of 200 feet into a canyon. There was no warning sign, no guardrail, no indication the road ended. He backed up carefully and returned to Highway 97. When he checked his GPS, the route was gone. He reported the incident to the county sheriff. Deputies investigated and found no road matching his description. They suggested he had taken a wrong turn onto a private driveway or a closed Forest Service road. The trucker insisted the road had been on his GPS. The deputies said GPS units sometimes showed outdated or incorrect data. The trucker said this was different. The road had been real. It just should not have been there. He provided his GPS unit to investigators. They extracted the travel log. The log showed him leaving Highway 97 at a specific mile marker and traveling east for 2.3 miles before stopping. The coordinates placed him at the edge of a known cliff face in the national forest, but when investigators visited the coordinates, they found no road, no tire tracks, no disturbed vegetation. The ground was rocky and uneven, impassable for a vehicle. The trucker insisted he had driven on pavement. His truck's undercarriage showed no damage from off-road travel. His tires were clean, not caked with dirt or mud. If he had driven 2.3 miles on rough terrain, there should have been evidence. There was none. A second incident occurred 3 months later. A husband and wife team reported their GPS offered a shortcut near Kamult. They took it. The road started paved, then became gravel, then dirt. They drove 10 minutes before the road narrowed dangerously. Trees scraped the trailer. At the top of a steep grade, they entered a clearing. An old truck from the 1980s sat abandoned, half buried in vegetation. The cab was empty. The trailer held rotted pallets. The clearing was silent. They turned around immediately. The drive back felt different. The road seemed narrower. Branches scraped louder. When they returned to Highway 97, their trailer had deep scratches. The GPS log showed no detour. They quit trucking 2 months later. These incidents were compiled by a researcher studying GPS reliability. She documented over 20 cases of phantom routes in Oregon between 2016 and 2025. The cases shared common features. All occurred near Kamult. All involved routes branching east from Highway 97. All resulted in drivers encountering roads that should not exist. And in every case, the GPS log was incomplete or showed conflicting data. The researcher concluded that the area had a unique combination of factors: complex terrain, sparse cell coverage, and outdated mapping data. But she noted one outlier. In most GPS error cases, drivers realized the mistake quickly. In the Oregon cases, drivers often continued for miles. She speculated that the phantom routes appeared more legitimate than typical errors. The roads started paved. They had clear sight lines. By the time conditions deteriorated, turning around was difficult. She called it a GPS trap and recommended verification layers for high-risk areas. The recommendation was acknowledged, but not implemented. The journalist updated her article. She noted the 2024 incident and the earlier reports. She called the phenomenon GPS mirages, routes that appeared real but led to danger or nowhere. She speculated that the terrain around Highway 97, with its mix of high desert and forest, created unusual atmospheric conditions that interfered with GPS signals. Or perhaps the area had been used for GPS testing in the past, and remnants of test data remained in some databases. She admitted she had no proof, but the stories were persistent and the details too consistent to dismiss entirely. The driver's wife sold their home and moved to Arizona. She said Oregon held too many painful memories. She kept the novel recovered from the truck. The pages were brittle and smelled of smoke, but the words were still readable. She never finished it. She placed the book on a shelf and tried to move on. The ridgeline where the truck had been found was surveyed and marked. The Forest Service installed a plaque at the site. The plaque was made of bronze and bolted to a rock. Within a year, someone had removed it. The Forest Service did not replace it. Truckers still drive Highway 97 every day. Most pass through Kemmelt without incident. Their GPS units show the highway clearly, along with legitimate turnoffs and rest areas. But some drivers, late at night or early in the morning when traffic is light, report seeing an option on their screens. A route that branches east, promising to save time. A road labeled County Route 615. Most ignore it. They know the stories. They know the road does not exist. But a few, pressed for time, or curious, or simply tired of the highway, consider taking it. They slow down, looking for the turnoff. And for a moment, they swear they see it. A paved road leading into the trees, smooth and inviting, as real as the highway beneath their wheels. Then they blink, and it is gone. Just forest and shadows, and the endless white line of Highway 97, leading them home.